Hi everyone. I would like to start doing some vlogs to share about my experience when I was on a trip to Europe. You may or may not know that me, my sister Leila, and her son Cesar went away for 2 months. So we left the farm. Currently, we live in South Africa on a farm. And we left for 2 months. We first went to Belgium. That's where we're from originally, me and my sister. So we went and stayed at our parents' house, the house we grew up in. Then for 2 weeks we went to Spain because we have some family there as well. So to give the family there also the opportunity to meet little Caesar, and for Caesar to meet his family in Spain. And then after our holiday in Spain, we came back to Belgium, spent another 2.5 weeks about in Belgium, and then we came home. Now, what was very interesting is to see the differences between South Africa and the farm where we live now. I will just say the farm because obviously South Africa is a huge country with many different areas, many different living arrangements. So I can't speak for all of it, but the farm that I know, that I can speak about. So the difference between the farm, the house we stayed at in Belgium and the town we stayed in, and then the place we stayed in Spain. And to see how the different environments really change how you raise a child. In other words, what opportunities are there? What can and can't you do? What becomes easy? What becomes difficult? What become the most prominent tendencies? How does it influence the child? So let's start with the farm. This is what Caesar is used to. He's lived here since he was born. A few days after he was born, he came to the farm, and that's where he's been living. Once in a while we would go, we would go to town, we would go out. But not very often. He's still very small. So the farm is what he knows. It's the environment he grew up in, and it's the environment that we live in, meaning it's our environment. So we were able to decide that when Caesar came into our house, because the farm is a property with different houses, each house has their own garden. So Caesar lives in the house that Leila and Guillen lives in, and that me and Lizzie John live in. So when Caesar came into our house, we were able to decide how we wanted to organize ourselves and our house in a way that it would support Caesar. So what we've always done is to adjust ourselves, adjust the arrangements in the house, in a way that it supports Caesar. So what we didn't do, maybe that makes it clearer, what we didn't do is ask of Caesar to adjust himself to us and our house, and that he must learn not to do this or do that because we like it the way it is. No, we did the other approach of saying, look, there's a child in our house, we have to make some changes because a child is not an adult and he interacts with his environment very differently. Of course, especially in those first few years, he's going to interact with his environment. He's going to explore. He's going to bang on things. He's going to pull on things. He's going to make a lot of noise. He's going to touch things. He's going to try to climb on things. I mean, that's a child. That's what a child does. I mean, when you come into this world as a child, that's what you have to do. You have to get to know what physical reality is. You have to know what things are so that you know how to interact with it. You know if something hurts, you know if something is squishy or something is rough. Then you can adjust yourself to what you've learned based on experience. So here in our house in South Africa, we will adjust ourselves to him. We will put child locks on the cupboards when we know that if he opens those cupboards, which he probably will do or will like to do, then he can hurt himself, he can break things, things like that. So we direct him to not be able to do certain things. But then, for instance, if we have locks on our kitchen cupboards, then we will have one cupboard that is accessible to him, where there's no lock, and where we put all kinds of objects that he can play with, that we know is safe for him, that he can destroy, so that he can interact with cupboards, so that he learns how a door works, so that he knows what it means to take something out of a cupboard and put it back in there. But we simply direct it. We structure it in a way that it's cool for him and it doesn't compromise the living arrangements. Because we also live with a lot of dogs, and obviously, if he starts taking things out or starts throwing, I don't know, ceramic pots around, I don't know, just to give an example, and things shatter, then that becomes a problem for the dogs who walk around on the floor and can hurt themselves. So it's been very much touch and go to see what do children actually naturally do, how do they investigate, what are actually the dangers in our home for a child, and how can we give Cesar the opportunity to learn about it without endangering himself, ourselves, and the animals. So that is the farm. And now I talked about my house, our house, but it's the same everywhere. You know, he will go from one room to another room to another room, each time exploring, expanding himself, learning something new. When he's done with the rooms, he'll go into the garden, play with the plants, play with flowers, with sand, with rocks, anything. When he's done in one garden, he moves on to another one. He goes and say hi to the animals there, to the people there. And you know, the people on the farm, they support him. They greet him, they welcome him, they spend some time with him. You know, no matter what they're doing, they will take a moment and say, "Hey Cesar, have you seen this? You know, what are you doing?" And just support him in what it is he's doing, because it's an important phase in his life. To learn about the world and to learn to interact with people, with animals, with nature, with physical reality. So that about sums up the farm. So when we were in Belgium, we stayed at our parents' house. Now that house, well, firstly, before I talk about the house, the weather was entirely different. It was winter over there, very cold. I hadn't experienced cold like that in a long, long time. Totally forgot what it felt like. So here in South Africa, when Cesar wants to go outside, we go outside. You know, the door is open, he can go out. There's no danger for cars to come and run him over, because the road is much further. There's garden and garden and garden and garden, and then there's the road. So our house is at the back. There's no roads nearby. So if he leaves our house, he's in a garden, and if he leaves that garden, he's in another garden. If he leaves that garden, he's in another garden. So it takes quite a while for him to actually get to a road. And of course, there's always someone with him. Whereas in Belgium, if he wanted to go outside, he had to put socks on, he had to put shoes on, he had to put 2 jackets on, preferably a scarf. If you wanted to go in the garden, that's the garden. The garden was very small, only so much you can do in there, only so long he's interested in being there. And then the other option was to go out on the street, because from the door it was literally, you open the door, you're on the street. So then he has to be in a stroller, because he doesn't have the habit of holding hands, especially when we arrived. He didn't have the habit of holding hands because it's not necessary where we live. We didn't have a reason to teach him that, and he wouldn't have seen the reason to humor us in that, so to speak. So he didn't hold hands. So we had to put him in a stroller, stroll him around until we get to a safe area where there is no cars, where he wouldn't, you know, just run under someone's wheels. And that meant going to playgrounds. So there was 2 playgrounds in that town, one rather small one inside a little park, and then a bigger park with a big playground. So it's an entirely different story for him to, the experience of being outside already becomes very limited. Here in South Africa, he's inside, now he's outside. And he's outside, now he's inside. Whereas over there, there's this whole preparation that has to happen because the weather is different. He had to be put in a stroller. We had to first walk him, which took either 10 minutes to the small park or half an hour to the large park, for him to be able to then finally walk around and play on all the things and the tools that are there. Where sometimes he would even fall asleep by the time we're there. And then, well, then we have to wait for him either to wake up, or we simply had to go back home, and then he's back in the house. So it's extremely different. And then inside the house, it's a 3-story house, which was not our house. My parents had renovated their house a few years ago, so it was all newly painted, new cupboards, new tiles. So they were not too keen on having a little one going and putting their sticky hands on everything, touching everything, going and playing into the pot plants, take the dirt out and put it over the floor. Where, it's for us, if that were to happen here, which had happened a lot, he would go to a pot plant and take the dirt out and throw it on the ground. We'll let him do it. We'll just clean up afterwards. Because he's not really harming anything or anyone. Obviously, if he's going to dig the roots up of the plant, yeah, sure, then we'll put a stop to it. But so long as he's not harming anything or anyone, we don't see the problem in it. I mean, yes, he's making something dirty, but it's only for a moment. Then you clean it up and then it's sorted. There's no issue. Because for an 18-month-old child to understand that you like your house to be neat and clean is very difficult. And it's very hard to explain to a child why it is that you like your house to be clean, why he shouldn't touch certain things before washing his hands, or why he should wash his hands 5, 10, 20, 25 times a day. It's like, wait, why? I've already just played with water now. Why must I do it again? So, I mean, for one, I don't think adults often know why they want their house to be neat. We've noticed so many times that people in Belgium, and perhaps all over the world, but it's because we were in Belgium that it stood out, that they had real issues with sand. Sand on their floor, sand on the couch, sand in the hallway, no matter what. But sand was an issue. So just having the idea of having sand somewhere made them so upset, made them so frustrated and irritated because now there's sand in their house, that they would immediately tell Cesar to stop. No, you can't do that. Take him away, clean up everything first, make sure there's no sand on him, and only then is he allowed to enter the house, for instance. But I don't think people even think about it. It's just like automated. Sand, that's a problem. But why is it a problem? I mean, you can. Sand is easy to wipe up. You just clean it up and the sand is gone. Sure, it's not convenient, but it's not really a problem. It's not going to harm anyone. It's not going to kill anyone. So there's obviously a whole set of value systems and things that people think is important that is influencing them to change their behavior towards a child. Where to a child it might make no sense, and you might not even be able to explain to the child why you think it is important, because we tend to just do these things automatically. It's just ingrained in us. We don't like sand. We don't like the child having dirt all over his face. We must wipe the face. We can't have a child having wet socks. The child must have clean, dry socks. Yeah, so a lot of these points kept coming up, and it was quite a challenge to ease the water, so to speak, and try to assist people to question why they think something is important and why not. So that it's not for Cesar continuous, no, don't, stop, wait. Because that's what it started becoming, and for Cesar that was like, what's happening? What am I doing wrong? Is something wrong with me? And obviously there was nothing wrong with him. It was just that the values and what is important to one and what is important to another was not the same. To Cesar, making something dirty is not an issue. For him, exploring something is important. Whereas for the adult, it was keeping things clean and neat and nicely presented was important. And the child being cute was important, but the child exploring things not so much. So it just depends on what you think is important and what not. Okay, so let's just leave it at that for Belgium at the moment. And then there was Spain. Now, the biggest difference between Belgium and Spain was how people interacted with Caesar, meaning strangers, not necessarily us or my parents, but strangers. And that's the point I haven't touched upon yet. But like in South Africa, people welcome and greet Caesar. It's normal. You see a child, you interact with it, you welcome it. In Belgium, you see a child. Well, you don't see a child actually. When we would walk on the street with the stroller, Caesar in the stroller, or later on he would start holding hands, people don't look at him. People ignored him, like he didn't exist. There was no hi, hello, how are you, what's your name? Nothing. It was just like he wasn't there. And then you had Spain. And in Spain we stayed in a touristic area. So it was by the beach, a very touristy area. So what kind of people lived there was pensioners and people on holidays. And now there, every single person said something to Caesar. Whenever they passed someone, they would interact with him, they would greet him, they would make a remark or make a joke even, they would even play with him. I mean, it was awesome. He loved it. Of course a child will love it. He's actually being seen. In Belgium, it's like he didn't exist, and that's how he was treated. In Spain, he was welcomed, he was recognized the whole time. So that was, even though in Spain we had an even smaller house, we didn't even have a house. It was an apartment with a few rooms, few bedrooms, because it was just for a holiday. We rented an apartment. It was very small, really not suitable for a child. He couldn't go outside at all by himself. I mean, we were on the 4th floor, I think. So there was even more preparation to go outside. But once outside, it was great. I mean, there were so many things he could do. He could play on the beach, he could play with the water, he could go for really long strolls. And there was constantly people talking to him. There was playgrounds quite regularly, because there's also a lot of kids that stay there with the people that go on holiday. They bring their kids. So there's already provisions for that in that town, to welcome children and for children to have fun. So even though the apartment, the house, was not suited for children, it was balanced out by the fact that the town was welcoming to children. The people, they were welcoming to children and supportive for children. So there you have three very different scenarios. You have the farm, community living, everything is about the child. We adjust ourselves to the child so he can explore anything he wants. He can go inside, outside. It's constant exploring. Then you had Belgium, which was almost the opposite. Child is not welcome, it's inconvenient. Child has to adjust to the world of the adults, what they think is important, and the adults will really be on him to make sure he is disciplined and behaves. And then you had Spain, where it was in between. I mean, the house was not supportive so much for the child, but the environment was the larger community was very supportive for the child. So I'll talk a bit more in the next video about what I noticed in terms of the different cultures makes quite a difference in these points. Okay, thanks.